Everybody, how are
Wow.
you? And bear with me for 1 second.
I don't know if you can hear
Okay.
me. Oh, okay, it sounds better. I was going to say you sounded a little muffled before, but now it sounds
Oh, you know what? I was trying to post us in the Facebook group, and it was actually, hopefully, it didn't hear it on this side. It was actually double sounding, believe it or not. So, however, the gods and goddesses of Facebook work, that was the way it is. So, welcome everyone to today's Lunch and Learn. Give us a little hello if you are out there and listening, because we want to hear from you. Today's topic is important, really important. Carissa and I, we were discussing this last week, and we're
Mhm.
like, oh my gosh, we really need to have this as a lunch and learn conversation. So we want you guys to chime in, because there is this fine line with self-compassion, right? Sometimes we're not compassionate with ourselves enough. I know some of my type A can get in the way sometimes of me being self-compassionate personally, but then on the flip side, sometimes we can be like over self-compassionate, where we're using self-compassion as a scapegoat. And so it's like, what's that balance? So if you've ever said to yourself, I'm just being kind to myself right now, but deep down you hear that like quiet voice listening, or maybe I'm avoiding what I really need to do. If that's the case, you're certainly not alone, because we as human beings, we do this. So this is what we're going to talk about today. This fine line between self-compassion and self-sabotage, because self-compassion, it is 100% essential for our healing. We can't heal without it. But if we misuse self-compassion, then it becomes this convincing kind of rationalized scapegoat, one that can actually keep us stuck while
Mhm.
making us feel like we're doing something good, right? And I think it comes down to, how do we know the difference? And that's really what Carissa and I want to unpack with you guys today, right? So you can really start using self-compassion as a true source of empowerment, right? Not as an excuse to stay where it is that you are. How's that sound, Carissa?
Perfect. Because I think this is such a good one. Like you said, we talked about it last week, and I've definitely had those moments where I told myself, um, I'm being kind to myself,
Yes.
but later I realized I was actually maybe sidestepping something that really needed my attention. And I think a lot of people relate to that, especially those of us who've been, through burnout, or we're overly
Mhm.
stressed, or
Mhm.
maybe trauma, like where slowing down is part of the healing, but
Yeah.
sometimes we lose the line between like true rest and emotional hiding. And I think that's why this topic is so awesome, because real self-compassion isn't weakness, and it's definitely not an excuse, right?
Mhm.
It's kind of that space where you honor yourself without enabling the patterns that can keep you stuck.
Yes. You know what? Our brains are really good at at putting us in a specific space, right? I mean, there are certainly days where I may run myself too much, right? And those might be the days that I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that workout. I'm so tired. But the
Mhm.
truth is, like, maybe it's not a hardcore workout, but maybe I could really benefit from stepping away from the computer and going out for a walk. But
Mhm.
I have to catch myself in that space being like, "Oh, you're tired. Just rest, honey. Like, let's take care of your adrenal glands, right?" Because that's
Mhm.
what I would say to myself. So it really is, it's we've got to just start to be able to look at things from a different lens, kind of step outside of our own mind, so to speak. I always like to advise our clients, it's helpful sometimes if you just kind of take yourself and like literally like take yourself out of yourself, as if you're a fly on the wall, and just observe your actions, observe your thoughts, and what do you notice from those actions or thoughts? Because sometimes just that little perspective shift can be really valuable.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that I experienced too. And I love that visual of being a fly on the wall, because I've definitely had those moments where I tell myself, like, yeah, I mean, I've had it in class, like, exercising and like hot yoga, say, you know what I mean? I'm like, oh, too tired. I gotta take a break. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But deep down, I know that maybe I should keep on pushing,
Right.
because maybe it's not so much about recovery; it's more about resistance, which likes to pop up for me. And I
Yeah.
think that's the tricky part with self compassion, right? It can sound like self care, but if you zoom out, like you just talked about, like separating yourself and being that fly on the wall and look at what we're actually choosing, sometimes we're just avoiding the discomfort.
Yeah.
So, what helps me is asking, like, would I offer the same advice to someone I care about? Or
Mhm.
am I truly just trying to justify staying small? Because as we know, it can be uncomfortable to grow and go past our boundaries and go past to what we're used to. And I think that shift is, that shift into observation, like you said, Dr. D, it gives us back our power, because now we're witnessing our behavior instead of being ruled by it.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I think there's so part of the fine line. So let's kind of break it down, right? Self-compassion is not, it's not pity. It's not self-pity. It's not, it's not letting yourself off the hook. It's not a free pass to disconnect. True self-compassion is about meeting yourself where you are, right? With truth and tenderness. It says, I see your pain and I know you're capable of so much more, right? And self-compassion, it allows us to take full responsibility without actually spiraling into shame.
Mm,
So, for example, um, think of a compassionate coach or a mentor, right? They don't yell at you, but they don't let you say small either, right? That's what you do, right? That's what we
mhm,
do in our practice. Like, we're not going to yell at our clients. That's insane. But
mhm,
we also want to challenge you to grow beyond where you are, because we can see your greatness and your future already before you. So it's really about meeting you where you are and calling yourself forward. And that's kind of who we have to be for ourselves. We've got to be the voice that says, I, I get it. You're tired, you're overwhelmed, and yes, you can take the next step. And therein lies the power. But I know things can get really tricky though, right? Sometimes we use the language of compassion, but we're actually, like you said, avoiding the discomfort. So we
mhm.
can we can call it what it is. Like, I need to rest could be like that cover for procrastination, or I'm listening to my body, maybe becomes a word that we say when we're scared, right? Or I'm giving myself grace becomes, I'm stuck and pretending that I'm okay with it. And these are the scapegoat versions. And they come from trauma. They come from perfectionism. They come from nervous system dysregulation, right? I go through them myself. I think we all do as part of being human beings, because the truth is, when we feel unsafe, right? When we feel overwhelmed, the brain looks for that escape. It's uncomfortable, and our brain needs to kind of see its way out of there. So sometimes escape can sound really nice, really kind, but
Mm,
the problem is it going to keep us in the same loop, right? So those of you who are listening, I want you to kind of ask yourself the question, have I used self-compassion as a way to avoid responsibility? Right? Have you used self-compassion as a way to avoid responsibility? And you guys, please feel free to drop comments in the chat there. I just turned it on the comments. I can see them now. But the other thing is, have you have you said, I'm giving myself grace, when what's really there is fear? Okay.
Mm.
Like fear of change, fear of what's there, fear of failure. Because you guys, it's not about blame, it's really about awareness. Until we know that this hand is back here going like this, until we pull it to the front and we can look at it and see it, we
Hmm.
can't do anything about it. So it is a fine line. Yeah, Debbie says this is so what I need to hear today. And Debbie, you're not alone, right? Every single one of us goes through this, and we're all going through some version. And there may be areas in our life where we're really great about it, and then there may be areas in our life where we're really not, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it with clients, and honestly, I've done it myself. I use beautiful language like rest and grace or listening to my body, like you said, but it could just be dressed up fear. So I have to kind of ask myself, what's the energy underneath the words I'm using,
Yes.
and real self compassion. I've learned it doesn't just comfort us, right? It kind of calls us up.
Yeah.
In our work, we always say, like, we're not here to coddle you, but we absolutely will walk with you, as you rise up. And
Yes.
sometimes that's super uncomfortable. So I feel like if you've been stuck and, you're telling yourself you're being kind, you're not wrong. You're just probably ready to maybe redefine how you define that kindness.
Yeah.
I know for me, like when I'm tired and I need to move and exercise, it's so easy for me to be like, let me just watch a TV show.
I need to rest.
Yes, but however, it does not make me feel better. When I'm done watching that TV show, like I never, ever, ever feel rested.
Mm.
Ever. Like usually, I think you said it in the beginning, like maybe my workout is just different.
Mhm.
Maybe I don't need a jumping around and high impact. Maybe I need more of like a stretching and a breathing and, slow movement. That's the stuff that makes me feel good. And have I used self compassion in a way to avoid responsibility? Yes, I just said it, like, because if we're honest, sometimes I think what we call grace, like you said, is the fear wrapped in that soft language.
I love what you said, and it just sparked in my mind something. I think it's really important for, as we're kind of being that fly on that wall and taking perspective, is to kind of like imagine, okay, like in this moment, how would my future self feel about whatever this is? Like if I don't go for that walk, or I don't do that workout, or I choose to have, deviate from whatever my dietary regimen is. How would my future self feel about that? Would my future self be like, right on, you did what you needed to do to take care of yourself? Or would your future self be like, well, we probably could have made a better choice, but now let's move on. Notice none of those are beating oneself up, right? But
Mhm.
there are different results on either side of that. And I think that is another good sort of litmus test that's just kind of popping into my head as we go through here. I think there's some good questions in addition to that one that will help us kind of differentiate between something being self-compassion and a cop-out. And I say this so you guys who are watching, I mean, Carissa and I work with this every single day with our clients, and you who are our clients know, like sometimes we've got to sit and we have to listen and observe, and we have to kind of go through like, okay, is this self-compassion or is this self-sabotage? And I got to tell you, sometimes self-sabotage can look like self-compassion. And sometimes you those of you who are clients, we may need to even ask you like, hey, so is this really self-compassion or is it something else? Because only you know that. So there's 3 questions I want you to think of, right? So number one, well, actually, I'm gonna do 4 because I'm gonna throw in that future self one because I think that's important. But ask yourself, like, is this choice moving me closer to the life that I want, right? Or is it keeping you comfortable? Is the choice moving you closer to the life that you want, or is it making you comfortable? Is it justifying where you're at, or justifying what your choice or your action was or about to be? Okay. And the second question is, am I avoiding some sort of discomfort? Okay. Am I avoiding discomfort or am I honoring what my actual needs are? Because you guys, we can call avoiding discomfort self compassion all the time. But
Mhm.
if our goal is to grow, if our goal is to evolve, well, as human beings don't like change, right? Because where you are is safe, even though it might not be where you desire to be. You know it, right? Your brain knows it. It's automatic. It's why we continue with habits, whether we like them or not sometimes. So we need to ask ourselves, as we're kind of in that space making a decision, am I avoiding discomfort? Okay. And then if I believed in myself fully, what would I do?
Mm.
I fully believed in myself, what would I do? Right. Because that speaks to that like fear of failure. I speak with a lot of women, right, who are, they're like, hey, I want to really get myself better. I need to transform my health. And sometimes what's underlying that, when they're sort of on the precipice of whether they're going to move forward or not move forward, they run into this fear of failure. Like, I've tried things before, they haven't worked, or I know myself, I can never follow through, or I do good for a week, but then I fall off. And so sometimes, right, or not wanting to disappoint yourself. So that's a really good space to stand in, is if I believed in myself, what would I do next? Okay. Is this helpful for you guys? Throw it into the comment section if this is helpful. So there was 4 questions, right? One is, what would your future self say, right? The other one is this choice moving me closer to the life that I want, or is it keeping me comfortable? Okay. Number 3 is, am I avoiding discomfort or am I honoring my actual needs? Okay. And number 4, if I believed in myself fully, what then would I do? And you guys, I encourage you, write them on a sticky note, right? Write them down somewhere, maybe put them where you think you're going to need them most, where you self sabotage, right? Because self compassion that leads to growth will feel tender, right? It'll feel a little bit like you're stretching yourself, because compassion then that leaves you stuck, right? That kind of compassion feels good in the short term. Okay. It's really hollow in the long term, right? Like you said, it like might feel good in the moment that I sat down to watch TV, but afterwards I don't feel
Mhm.
good anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's really important for you to think about, because things are not always comfortable as we learn and we grow as human beings. And there could be 2 of the exact same instances for 2 different people, and what's right for them, what's self-compassion for one could be self-sabotage for another. You see the gray line here? I mean, in the true wellness framework that we have created at South Bay Wellness, that we operate from, we talk about empowerment, right? That's the E. We talk about the T, tuning in. And tuning in is what really helps. It helps you recognize the truth from the story, because they're often different, you guys. And empowerment is what helps you choose between, action that's aligned with what you want versus, a reactive pattern.
Hmm. Yeah. And I love to, like, I just want to highlight what you said before, because I think it's kind of everything. And self sabotage can, like, wear that costume of self compassion. And sometimes we don't realize it until we're already kind of halfway down the road. So I love those questions, because I think when we stop and ask them honestly without judgment, we kind of, not kind of, actually, we can interrupt that automatic pattern. And
Yeah.
I love bringing the future self into it, because she knows, or he knows, and they're not judging where you are, but they see where you're meant to go. So if you've been saying things like, I just need a break, or I'm being kind to myself, check that energy underneath it. Is
Yeah.
it honoring your nervous system, or is it keeping you in a loop of, I think we said this last week, of like almost healing? And I love that Debbie commented about perfectionism, because that sneaks into this too. And myself too, but I've also had clients tell me, like, if I can't do it all the way, I just don't do it, and I used to, make fun of myself too at times where I'm like, I could be the poster child for perfectionism because I, at a time in my life, needed to do something perfect, you
Yeah.
know, and doing it that way, that's not self-compassion either. That's avoidance dressed up in pressure. And then sometimes we avoid the next step, not again because we're lazy. I think that's, so far from the truth, but because we're scared, we won't do it perfectly, right? But
Mhm.
real healing has nothing to do with perfect, and it has everything to do with showing up honestly and messy and human, and it is uncomfortable. I think sometimes we think like to heal means like we're going to be, walking around like, oh, everything's so bright and wonderful all the time. But there's pain because things are kind of getting upheavaled and they're coming up and they're coming out. When we're dealing with perfectionism, it whispers like, don't try unless you can nail it. And I think that's the moment to pause and ask, like, is this my truth? Or again, is it the fear calling the shots again?
Hmm. Yeah, it's so true. I personally struggle a lot with perfectionism. It's something I'm always working on, like literally trying to be more compassionate with myself, or sometimes it's not even more. Sometimes it's just being compassionate with myself. And these things come from some place. And when you can start to get like where the motivation or where that drive or where that habit is coming from, it really helps. Like I remember very distinctively when I was really little, we lived in an apartment we lived in an apartment in Brooklyn, and I had this little teeny tiny bedroom, and my bed was up against a wall, and I was probably like, I don't know, 3 or 4 years old, and the wall had like a ton of cracks in the paint. And my mother, just being a normal standard mom, because as moms or as parents, sometimes we say stupid stuff, like we don't think about it, we're just trying to coerce our kid to do whatever they're supposed to do. But I remember very distinctively, like my mother said, every time I yell at you, there's a new crack in that
Mm,
wall. And so in my little like child brain, that became like, oh my gosh, I better be perfect, right? I better not mess up. I better not screw up. I better not upset people, right? I better not do those things. There goes the people pleaser too, right?
mhm.
So, but it's funny because now if you can distinguish those moments, and when those moments occurred for you, you can have some mastery and some facility over it, right? So I can ask myself, okay, am I being the little girl in the bed, or am I being who I choose to be?
Mm,
And that's a clear distinctive. The world changes when you can look through that different lens. Does that make sense?
mm. Yeah, I really feel that. And I'm so glad you shared it because I think a lot of people don't realize that perfectionism often comes from a very young part of us. Most of the things do,
Yeah,
right?
I do.
They come from a very young part of us trying to like stay safe, and I've seen this in clients too. And myself, I can certainly be a micromanager and a control freak, kind of like a survival artist.
Yes.
And we can like adapt to our environments where maybe being perfect felt like the only way to avoid that pain, and that's what I always tell people, like that's where self-compassion comes in, right? And it's not a weakness, it's that rewiring when we can notice like, oh, this is maybe my inner child, or if you have a timeline like you said, 3 or 4, trying to stay safe by overperforming, like we get to decide whether she's in the driver's seat or you as your adult are in the driver's seat, and we
Mhm.
can always bring her along. I always suggest when you're working with your inner child, like there's no need to shove her away, just give her a seat at the table, and because it's not about blaming the past. It's really about recognizing the pattern so we can start to choose differently
Yeah,
in
that's the
empowered
distinction. That's the distinction, Carissa, is the ability to choose,
ways.
right? It is the ability to choose. It's the ability to choose, like, hey, you know what? I'm going to scapegoat right now. But being in control of the option, not disillusioned by the
Mm-hmm.
option. Does that make sense? Because again, if we can't see it, we can't change it. And for those of you who don't know, we do a lot of breakthrough work with our clients in our practice. We have a very specific breakthrough program. We have a Body Beautiful program where we do a lot of this. We have retreats there. We have one that's upcoming in November. Registration is not open to the public yet, but it's coming soon. But we have all these events where we do this like inner child work and this part work, right? Like there is the part of me that wants to be perfect, and then there's the part of me that just wants to freaking relax, right? And so long as those parts are in conflict, there's no peace, so to speak. And so it's important to bring the parts together in order to create the space of peace for ourselves, right? That way we're living our life with intention versus kind of being pulled along by all of these sort of unseen things that are happening, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, and they're both trying to protect you,
Yeah.
right? And the ability to use is the ability to choose, right? And that line right there, I think, was everything, because we're not talking about being perfect. We're talking about being present enough to see the pattern and then start to choose differently. So whether it's the part of you that wants to push or the part of you that just wants to collapse, like neither one is wrong, but when they're fighting each other, we stay in chaos, right? And that's why the work that we do is so powerful, because when we start integrating those parts, right, that's when we start living from intention
Yes.
instead of reaction.
Yes.
But it's important that when we do integrate those parts, we, you know, keep ourselves aligned with that, because we very easily can fall right back into it because the body doesn't have enough of that repetition to be like, oh, okay, this is my new way. So it is important to continue to do the work after that. And like you said, I think that's why, the Body Beautiful program, the breakthrough work, especially our retreats, you can learn something each and every time you do them.
Mm-hmm.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like there's always something else that's being unlocked. There's
Yeah.
always something else that you see or you feel something hits you differently.
Yeah.
I mean, I've read books several times over. I've taken courses several times over.
Oh,
Um, because you don't just get the tools. It'll continue to help you meet parts of you that have been running the show.
yeah. We always get to see different parts. You guys, I always tell everybody, and if you're one of our clients, this is true. Like the journey doesn't end, right? There's not like a grand finale. It is a constant evolution, right? I never feel like I'm done in my growth work, because there's no such thing as done, right? There's always some other place to get to. Now, that doesn't mean that I beat myself up for not being at a certain place, because it is a journey. But you guys, I know we're running short on time here. So I really want you to start asking yourselves those questions, right? Like, am I pretending not to know something? What does my highest self need from me? What would I say, like Carissa said, what would I say to a friend,
Mm-hmm.
in my shoes? So you guys, those are all things to look at. And maybe finish this sentence. Like as you're trying to make a decision, like, do I work out or do I rest? Do I eat the chocolate cake or do I leave the chocolate cake? Right? I love myself enough to what? Right? Is it I love myself enough to take the walk? Is it I love myself enough to whoops to put the darn cell phone down as I'm scrolling before I go to bed, right? Or is it I love myself enough to ask for help? And these are really important questions, because this is where healing really begins. It's where healing starts to take momentum.
Yeah, and I love what you said. It is an ongoing journey because, and I love that, because there's so many ebbs and flows to it. So it never
Mhm.
gets boring. boring. You know, it's something that sometimes just cracks me open a little bit further, and I'm like, "Ooh, that was painful."
Yeah.
However, I reach another place where I'm like, "Oh, I'm feeling a little different in my body. I'm feeling a little better in my body, or I have more clarity." And so you just keep reaching that new heights, you know, and it doesn't mean that we shame ourselves, like you said, for not being somewhere else on the path. It just means we continue to stay in that conversation. So I know we're wrapping up, but I just want to invite everyone to, like, just take a breath when things are happening, and ask yourself those really amazing questions. Like, hopefully you'll write them down. You know,
I
am
put them
I
in the chat.
oh, perfect. Yeah, like,
I typed some in there before while you were talking.
good, you know, and I love, like, what does my highest self need from me right now? And what you said before, like, what would someone I love, or if I truly loved myself, like, what would I do? You know, and self-love can be really hard. So if saying what would I do if I loved myself feels icky, then I wouldn't suggest starting there. What I would suggest is saying, like, if I was learning to like myself,
Mm-hmm.
if that feels better in your body, then start there. If I'm learning to like myself, like, what would I do? Because the
Mm,
truth is, we do know, and
yeah.
we've always known. And the more that we meet ourselves with honesty and compassion, the more powerful our next step becomes.
Yeah. You know, you brought up another thought for me, and I'm going to take a minute because I think it's an important one. I know we're a couple of minutes over, but the point at which we think we know everything, or the point at which we think we've got it all figured out, that is the major point of illusion.
Amen.
Right?
It is.
That's the major point of illusion. So just keep that in mind, because it is, you know, it is a big red flag. So, all right, you guys, how do I want to wrap up? So, self-compassion, you guys, it's not soft, okay? It's actually
Mhm.
some of the strongest medicine that we have. But it only exists when we build trust with ourselves, okay?
Mhm.
Not when we avoid the hard truths or we avoid the hard work. So, it's important. You've got to be ready to move from stuck to strong, from overwhelm to ownership, from perfectionism, right, to actually power. And
Mm,
all of that lies in being able to distinguish exactly what we talked about today.
I
So
love that.
I hope you guys got it. I think Debbie Levy left us a heart in there. And you guys, if you're really struggling, if you want support from someone who's going to look at your body, your nervous system, look at you as a whole, right? Then I invite you guys to really step in, send us a direct message, say, "Hey, I need assistance." Raise your hand, let us know. Yeah, Lorraine says definitely an ongoing journey. It is such an ongoing journey, you guys. Such an ongoing journey. But hey, there's a lot of beauty in the journey. What else would we be doing?
Exactly. And I love that you said that, Lorraine, because it reminded me that real self-compassion isn't the way out. It's the way through, right? And
Mhm.
it's going through the journey. And I think it's one of the most powerful tools we have when we keep showing up to grow without punishing ourselves.
Yeah, I love that. All right, everyone. We'll see you